Well, hello and welcome to the Grace Hour Show, a Christian program that takes a dive into our daily challenges and helps us learn our faith in a practical way. My name is Liz Robbins, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Meg Ackerman, in the studio. And it's been a great week talking about just having health in our everyday lives. And today, Meg and I are going to be talking specifically about how to have a healthy family lifestyle. So it's going to be a good show. I did a show with Meg not too long ago with Roger too, and it was so much fun. So I'm really happy to be back with Meg again.
Yes,
Welcome.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Just as a quick introduction again, Meg is married to an awesome guy named Brian, and they have 4 amazing kids who are 11 and under.
Yes.
Yep, yeah. 11 and under. So in the thick of it. And she's also a biblical counselor who counsels family and kids. So you're just hitting all the right the right marks for this type of a topic.
Yeah.
I think that this show is going to literally fly by because you could do weeks and weeks on this topic.
Yes.
People have written books.
We could,
Read
yes.
the books if you want to. But we're just going to have some fun today. We really want this to be practical. So just a little idea of how this show is going to look. We're going to focus on, the four really important aspects of family life that we've kind of, or the producers have landed on, which is spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental. So that's kind of the framework that we're going to be, that we've been thinking about preparing for this show. And before we dive in, just again, that disclaimer that as we're talking today, there is so much that can be said. We will not be able to say it all. And then also, every family is so unique and so different. People may have 1 child, they may have 6. They may have a child who has additional needs. They might be living in a different country, a different culture. So there's just so many things that can affect the way that a family operates. And we just want to recognize that.
Yes.
And then our families are different. We have very different kids, different dynamics. So we just want you to understand that as we're giving tips today, or this is how our family does it, please only see it as hopefully an encouragement to you, some maybe food for thought, certainly not a mandate. Nothing that we in terms of our tips is like, if you're not doing this, you're doing a bad job.
Right.
But just some ideas, hopefully, as always, just encouraging, right?
Yes.
So we're going to get into it, and I'm really excited because when we were preparing for this, we're like, okay, what should we talk about? And I was like, what should we not talk about? Like, there's so much. Right. And actually, it was kind of encouraging. I've got 3 kids. My kids are 8, 10, and 12, which sounds like we planned things that we did not. Just to be clear, everybody's always like, oh, wow, that's not as planned as it sounds. But definitely, we're both in the middle of like these really important years, formative years. I'm getting into the teen years with mine. You've got one almost into teen, at least middle school.
Yeah.
And then you've got a little one. You've got, would you say she's a toddler?
She's 3.
She's 3. She's totally
3.
a toddler.
She doesn't think she's a toddler.
So we have quite a span, and we're really in the thick of it. So we are not necessarily looking back with the wisdom of somebody who's already raised their kids.
Right.
But we are pulling from the wisdom from the Bible, and then also just what we feel God's given us personally for our families. And that's a lot.
Yeah.
Really, I'm amazed that when I was preparing for this, I was encouraged by how much God has led us already. He's just given us a lot of wisdom, a lot of grace for sure. So, all right, let's get into it.
Okay.
When we were preparing for this, I asked you, I think it's important for a family to have a sense of mission and purpose that they intentionally, and when I say family, I mean the mom and the dad, the parents, or if it's a single parent, the parent has really sat and considered this with the Lord. So you could call it what you want. It can be a mission statement. I know some families do that. For us, it's really more like keywords or principles that we really like kind of hone in on often. And a lot of what we do in our family revolves around those things. And I think that that's something we could encourage parents, if you're a young parent or you're already in the thick of it, if you haven't yet, to ask yourself, what's important to you? And of course, with the Lord by your side, like what is it that you want to instill in your kids? What is it? What do you value? Because for sure, if we aren't doing that, the world is going to give us all kinds of things to distract us that can waste our time, that can keep us from investing in the right things, right? So I'll kick it off.
Sure.
All right. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'm going to get you talking.
Yes. Go ahead. Kick it off.
So for us, when I think about spiritual and emotional, I think what we often, these words are words that we are just using all the time, and that I want to instill these things into my children. And it's 2 words for us, and that is wisdom and humility. And later on the show, I'll talk more about like the practical side of that. But those are 2 things that I just, no matter where my kids go, no matter what their personalities are, if you've got an outgoing kid or you've got a quiet kid, if you've got a fearless kid or you've got a more cautious kid, if you've whatever it is, I want all of my children to value wisdom, and I want them to be humble. Which is a tall order for anybody, and especially for kids. They're not born humble, I tell you that. But those are 2 things that in our family, there's 2 words we talk about a lot. And then the other side of it would be like the physical and mental aspect of family life. And again, 2 words that we really hone in on and we talk about a lot, my kids are probably bored of these words, is trust and responsibility. So I'm talking about screen time, I'm talking about devices, I'm talking about chores, but basically the concept of trust and building trust, being a trustworthy person. How do you become one? And guess what? If you are trustworthy, the consequences of that are very good.
Yeah.
Right? And it builds. And with responsibility comes trust and hopefully more freedom.
Yeah.
Right? So those are some for us. I'd love to hear what you've kind of landed on, you and Brian and your family.
Yeah. I'm happy to share. For us, it's less of these are the words that we land on. It's kind of, we have a direction that we are hoping that our family ends up in, I guess.
Yeah.
But to real quick backtrack, you had mentioned when we were preparing for this, you had mentioned about wisdom. And you shared a story about your son, about how he makes excellent hash browns, which he's got to serve them to us someday.
Yes.
And how...
He's 8 years old, by the way. I'm very proud of that. He makes a killer hash brown.
And you had explained to him and your children that although he makes a great hash brown, if someone else comes alongside and says, hey, let me tell you my hash brown recipe, he can choose humility and by stopping and listening, despite the fact that he already makes a killer hash brown. And I wanted to share with you and with our audience that that's something that I shared with my children to explain to them. So I thought that was such a great example to explain to them that you guys can be really great at something, but taking the time to listen to someone else, whether their recipe is going to be better or not, that grows our wisdom. Having that humility grows our wisdom. So I think that's a really good point, whether it's our family mission, which I think overall wisdom and humility would be our family mission as well. But whether those are the words that we use, having this understanding that these are life lessons for our children. You know, like this is the way that we want to live, right? I want to live that way. Right. And so therefore we want our children to live that way and to have an understanding in that. So for some values that my husband and I think we could surely say that we would live by, And I did ask my children too, which was fun and interesting. We had talked about that.
Yeah.
But one was kindness.
Yeah.
The idea that kindness is very important. There's so much behind that word. There's so much behind that thought. It's packed. And compassion. And I found that both of my two oldest both said those things, kindness and compassion, whether they said the words or they told stories.
Okay.
And that's very important to us as a home, to like have compassion for other people and to be able to understand what someone else is going through despite where we're at. Acceptance is another one that came up, and resilience. Now that word is something that my husband and I have talked about a lot. We have 3 boys and a small girl. Our youngest is a girl. And we just feel like raising men, it's very important to have this place of resilience in their hearts, because the more resilient we are as people and the more courage we're going to have, the more strength that we'll have to get through the trials that are put before us. And speaking from the eyes of a child, a trial might be, I can't ride my bike and I need to learn how to ride my bike.
Right.
But that is growing the resilience in them so that if they're in a trial in their life as an adult or as an older person, they have an idea that they can get through this.
Yeah.
So resilience is a big one in our home.
So when you say resilience, and you just gave that example of the bike, I think, again, that's huge, because what I'm thinking about when you say that is failure. Like
exactly.
letting your kids fail.
Exactly.
And being right there alongside them so that they know, like, they're safe, but also that they kind of taste failure. They understand how to move through failure, which is isn't that what it is to be resilient? It's like, it's not that everything's easy.
Right.
And I think it's just easier said than done for a parent to let their kids fail, because we, especially moms, we are like wired to protect and to nurture. And there's an aspect of needing to let go that is hard for us.
Yes.
But I think that's a good challenge to ourselves and to the listening parents, that if we hold on too tightly to our kids, we will not be raising adults who are resilient and who are capable.
Yeah.
And you mentioned boys, but I'll tell you, I was just reading in a podcast I highly recommend. We mentioned it last time, Raising Boys and Girls podcast.
Yes.
Amazing, biblical, incredibly practical tips. I love that podcast. But I just saw something, and it was specifically about girls and how important it is for them to understand that they're capable.
Yes.
So I love that you're talking about it for boys. And we need to raise men who are, capable, hardworking, resilient, understand what their strength is for. And at the same time, our girls who are more anxious than ever.
Right.
We know from the statistics that we have like an epidemic of anxiety, and it's even more heightened in young girls, that they need to know that they're capable.
That's right.
Despite their worries, despite their fears, that they are capable, they can get through this, the uncomfortable thing, the scary thing. I have a daughter who is on the anxious side of life. And one of the things that she hates that I make her do all the time is order her own food. So like when we're at Chick-fil-A, which is really the only place I take my kids, let's be honest, but any kind of public setting, or if we're at a store and she needs a different size, I'm like, hey, go ask that lady for the different size. And I can see her whole body just be like, oh, I hate you so much, Mom. But she knows that I'm not going to do it. Yeah. So if you want to get the food, or if you want to get the right size, then you're going to have to do it. And I'm right there. But that's just a little example of instead of like doing really what could be easier, which is like, I'll just order.
Right.
Like just, okay, fine. But instead just being like, no, you can do it. Go ahead. It's okay. Just say this, you can give the script, whatever they need.
Yes.
But that's a very small example of just a bigger principle of letting our kids do things that are uncomfortable, that they don't want to do, but they need to be able to do, to be capable and to know that they are capable.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very good practical tip, actually.
Yeah.
That's something that we practice as well. If we do a sit down restaurant, all my children that can read, which is 3 out of 4 of them, I say, here's the menu, read what you want. I make sure it's not too expensive what they're getting.
Yeah.
And then the waitress comes and she looks at me and I point at the kids. Like even my 6-year-old, he's ordering his own food.
Yes.
So I think that's a very, like, we're jumping ahead to practical and saying that, but I think that's a really practical tip to allow children to build resilience, to build strength in anxieties or fears.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing is actually if you study out resilience, especially from a child's standpoint, from like a standpoint of how to counsel children into resilience, they are finding and they're seeing that a resilient child has more tolerance to anxieties and depressions.
Wow. Okay.
So they're not saying that it takes away the anxiety and the depression, but when it comes on, they have more tolerance to be able to, they have more tolerance to be able to fight it, to be able to stand up against it.
Yeah.
So the idea of, that's just a quick tip into an emotional mental health aspect of it. But
that's really good.
Yeah. So I think resilience is something that all parents, there's books on it. There's all kinds of studies done on it. And I think it's something that could be looked into.
Yeah. And I think one thing I also wanted to mention, we're talking about, we can just get into the practical really, because I know we've got a lot to say. But when it comes to anything practical, I just realized over the years how much just consistency is important.
Yes.
And I think as parents, that's the thing that gets us because we're tired.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I did it one time, but am I going to do it again the next time? Or am I going to do it the 10th time or the 15th time? And that's the aspect, we were talking about it when we were thinking about this show, like why are parents so tired? And also like, why is it so draining to parent? And I was thinking like, okay, if I have these principles for us, trust, responsibility, humility, wisdom, these are things that we're trying to focus on, instill in our children, then we have the practical ways we're doing that. In any given day, that looks a million different ways.
Right.
And within that, you're constantly kind of reprioritizing as the actual real life situation comes into play that day,
right? Whatever
it might be. So an example of that is like, okay, I've got a consequence that when a child does this, this is the consequence. But at the same time, I've got a child who I know is going through puberty. And so we've got emotions and like heightened reactions. And I want to instill in them that there's grace in our home, forgiveness, right? So at the moment when they, break the rule, for example, right in that instant, I am kind of shuffling through all the things that are important to us, the principles, the wisdom, and I've got to make a call in that moment. And then I have to follow through with it.
Yes.
And then another kid could get involved. And now I'm again reshuffling and reprioritizing.
Yes.
And there's just a constant, that's the word I just kept thinking, like prioritizing and then having to reprioritize as the situation morphs and changes.
That's right.
And it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So I just wanted to just shout out to parents
that
it's okay if you feel tired and overwhelmed or emotionally drained because it is a lot of just mental gymnastics that we are doing throughout the day. Whoever especially is the main, stay at home or the one doing the disciplining, it's a lot.
Yes.
And we're not trying to overburden anybody with anything today, God forbid. So we just want to recognize that and just tell you like it's okay. You're going to have days where you didn't hit the mark.
Yes,
it
and
wasn't
we have
a
days
home
where
run.
we don't hit the mark.
I mean, yesterday. Okay, yesterday was not a home run for me personally. I don't know about you, Meg, but for sure we need grace, and that's where I am like so blessed by having the Spirit of God present in our lives, who is not only able to teach us and guide us, but also is able to comfort us when we fail and give us grace. I mean, I think I've mentioned it before, but oftentimes when I think about motherhood and parenting at the end of a day, when I'm in bed, I'm just like, Lord, I just need you to pour grace over this whole day.
Yes.
You know, I need you to just cover this in your mercy, and tomorrow is a new day.
Yeah.
So in all of this, so just maybe that's just another disclaimer, is just to recognize that we're not looking to pile on overwhelming requirements or burdens on parents. But actually, I have found that having this focus, having these principles and you know, the mission, having them kind of clarified in my mind has actually helped me to feel a little bit lighter and less overwhelmed by the incredible responsibility that is parenting a child, much less more than one.
Yes.
It helps me because it gives me clarity, and
Direction,
like if I get off mission, off task, I can recognize that quickly and I can kind of get back on. So in a way, I do think it's really important, and it actually will help. It won't add more burden, but it will actually kind of help give clarity so that the little thing that you might make a really big deal out of, you can actually recognize and go, you know what, that's not a huge deal compared to this principle, this thing that's important. And it can help you with that prioritizing.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Right? To have it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Instead of just in every moment, you're just like making calls.
Yeah.
Because as parents, you're just making calls every day.
Yeah.
Should I ground them for this one? Should we go to the park? Should this be, you know? And so if you've got them ahead of time, it's going to help you in those split second decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
So, okay, so let's talk about some practical stuff that you do in your family and that we do in ours that help us with these, what we've already kind of talked about, that are important to our families. I asked my kids, and I recommended you ask your kids, what are some things that we do in this family that you know that help us have a healthy family lifestyle? My 12-year-old rolled her eyes when I said that phrase. And I was like, you know, I'm not looking for what you think, Mom. I was like, I already know what we do. Okay. So, but I want to know what you think actually helps us. So I was trying to just free her up to just really be honest. And not just tell me what I want to hear, because she's good at that. But one of the things that she said right off the bat was, well, we do chores. And I was like, okay, we do chores. Why? Why is that helpful to us? You know, because I think, again, our kids really love knowing why.
Yeah.
I mean, our kids have been asking why, but why?
Right.
But why?
Right. Yeah.
And they really do want to know why.
Yeah.
And I think as much as possible as parents, we can equip them with the why behind fill in the blank, whatever it is. And so I was glad that she was able to say why. Why do we do chores? Oh, because you're the worst. No, that's not. She didn't say that. She said, well, because we need to be able to do these things when we're older.
Yeah.
So she understands that chores are not a curse. They're just a part of life. They're an important part of life. You don't get paid for them. You know, like when you're a grown-up, no one's going to give you $1 for doing your own dishes. So we don't, in our family, we don't pay for chores. They're just a part of being a member of the family. Some people could pay for chores, but that's our why behind why we don't pay. We do actually give our kids allowance, and that's like another thing. But chores specifically are not paid jobs.
Right. Right.
Because they're a part of practical life. And my kids all know that we're raising adults and not children. And so we want them to be capable. So it goes into that being capable. And then she said, we go to church twice a week. And I said, well, why? Why do we do that? And she said, well, it helps us to be less mean to each other.
Good one.
And it helps us to hear from God. So that was great to hear from my 12-year-old. And of course, we know the value of going to church as a family. We love that. And that's why, we've worked on having in our church here family life nights, right?
Yeah.
Where we really celebrate family at church.
Yes.
And that kids are welcome and wanted in church. So anyway, so that was a good one to hear. And then the other big one, and these are all along the lines of the more, I guess, physical, mental health, controlled screen times. So we could spend so much time talking just about the damage that technology can have on young children. But we don't have time for all of that. But just to say to parents, if you haven't already had a reckoning with controlling your kids' screen time, please do. Please sit down and think about it. Read. There's so many good resources. BetterScreenTime.com is a great website that helps parents with that. But we're pretty serious about keeping our kids from just totally uncontrolled and unsupervised screen time. They do get to play video games sometimes. They get to have time on their iPads. They get to watch movies and shows. So we're not super extreme, but it's very controlled. Let's switch off. How about you do some now? So that was just one of my kids, but I want to hear some of yours.
Yeah. So I'm going to just lump a few things that they said together alongside other practical tips that I have. I couldn't snap my 11-year-old out of saying what he wanted me to hear. So well done, snapping your 12, because I kept saying, no, you don't have to say what I want to hear. And he's like,
he's like, what is this trick you're playing on me?
I said, there's no wrong answer. And he's like,
there for sure is, Mom.
So anyways, that's a little side note. So some things that my youngest son said this, and I was like, wow, that's really great.
And how old is he?
He's 6.
Okay.
And he said, we're open about things. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, if I accidentally see a picture of somebody not wearing enough clothes, then I need to tell you right away.
Okay.
So that might alarm some of our hearers. Why would my 6-year-old say that? But he said that because Mommy and Daddy have taught him that.
Yeah.
So that just practically speaking, we start at a very young age teaching our children that if they see something, say something because it protects them.
Yes.
And it's not Mom and Dad aren't going to be angry at you. We aren't going to be upset at you, but it's to keep you safe and to keep your mind safe. So I thought that was really cool that he saw that as one of the things the practical things that we do. And, we expounded a little bit to be sure we were all on the same page, which was kind of fun. So I asked my 9-year-old, okay, so if you're with a friend and you accidentally see something like that, what do you do? And he says, I ask them to turn it off and I leave. And when I get home, I tell you. And so it was really cool to see that a conversation that I have had with them, and it's not a daily conversation, right? But it's something that they take serious and they know this is Mom and Dad keeping me safe.
Yep.
So that was practical. And I encourage our listeners to know that these conversations, although could be uncomfortable, are incredibly important.
Yes.
To have them.
I'd like to chime in on that because I've heard a lot of parents kind of squirm at the thought of it. And we're right on the same page as you, Meg. It's something we don't talk about all the time, but we talk about it very matter-of-factly and very comfortably. And I got to tell you, I'm 3 kids in with these quote-unquote uncomfortable conversations, and they have gone very well.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because I have not allowed my discomfort to be a part of the conversation. So like I said, I'm very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Another thing that goes along with safety, child safety there is teaching them the anatomy of the body, private parts and their names. These are things, again, if you're listening and you're getting uncomfortable, please push through that.
Yeah.
Because your kids need to know that you've got all the answers, that you're a safe person to talk to about this. We don't use the word open, but we say no secrets, which is the same thing. So we don't want to have any secrets, but also Mom and Dad are your number one encyclopedia. We're better than Google. We're better than your friend at school. We have all the answers. And I say that, and then I gotta put my money where my mouth is. And when they come to me with a question, first of all, I'm pumped. Like you were just like, hey, he said that.
Yeah.
Same. I'm like, yes, great. Let's talk about it. And if they want to know what a word means, like they heard a word at school, they come to me, and that is a victory. And I make sure they know that I'm like, I'm really happy you asked me that. Absolutely. And I don't make it a huge deal. Not like, let's sit down and get super intense. I'm just like, yep, let's talk about it.
Yep.
And if it's appropriate, I make sure all my kids are there to hear it. If it's not, then it can be one-on-one.
Yeah.
But just again, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's something that our kids need to know, that they have bodily autonomy. They know about their bodies, and they know what's not right, and that they can talk to you about it.
Yes.
And man, that can save your kids from a world of hurt.
Yeah.
We can't even stress enough how important that is.
Yeah.
And I've got 2 girls who are going into middle school. One's in middle school, one's going into middle school. And I can tell you, just this year, the conversations we've had about the meaning of certain words, certain concepts that have been huge.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I was able to have them.
Yeah.
And just since we're giving resources, another one for this talk, we used to have the sex talk with kids, but there's an organization called the Birds and the Bees, also biblical and Christian based, that helps parents talk about the birds and the bees with their kids. But the concept they have is that it's not a one-time conversation, but it's a drip, drip, drip conversation, which just means a little bit of time. So you're building on information. You don't have to give them the whole spiel when they're 13. You give them a little bit, especially now,
Please,
right?
not when they're 13.
But you give them a little bit at a time. You're teaching them about their body. Then you teach them how babies are made. Then you teach them about, all of these things are building. It's beautiful. It's God's design. You don't have to be weird about it.
Yeah.
So Birds and the Bees is they have a great Instagram account. Highly recommend. All right, so let's keep going. But I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's really big.
Yeah. And then, so remind me, get me back on track.
Okay, so your one of your sons said that was his response, was that we're open.
Okay, and we're talking about practical tips within the family.
Yeah.
Practical.
So what's another one you've got that maybe your kids mentioned or you know is important?
Yeah. So practical. Some other practical things. So something else practical that we do as a family is we do monthly breakfasts with our kids.
Yes. Tell the people. I love this so much.
Yeah. So we were always burdened that we couldn't get one-on-one time with our children. We have 4 kids. There's only 2 of us. And we decided that what we were going to do is there's 4 weeks in a month. What we're going to do is we're going to switch off months. I do one month, Brian does the other month, and we take out the Friday morning of the week. We get up and we take out one of the children. And then the next week we do the other children. It's a one-on-one breakfast. And our kids love this.
Yeah.
They love it.
Of course they do.
Like even this morning, my 6-year-old woke up. I had forgotten, and last week I forgot too. It's summertime makes you forget, I think.
Yes.
And he woke up and he's like, Mommy, it's breakfast day.
Oh, I love it.
And so then you go to breakfast and they just sit there and they soak it up. And I purpose to put my phone aside. I don't touch my phone while I'm at breakfast for them. It is our time. It is a date. We take it and we enjoy it for what it is. And we talk on the level of each child that we're with, right? Like my 3-year-old, what are you going to say to her? Not much, but so anyways, that's something that I would highly suggest to families. And the way that we do it is we do breakfast, because if I can get up at 7:00 before the day starts, it's not going to get dismissed.
Right.
If I wait till dinner time, it could be, I don't have time. We can't do it. This is going on. So we just get it done. We get up early. We go to breakfast together. And then it's like we did it. So that's it.
What I love so much, I don't do this, but I have told you how much I love this idea, and I want to find a way to do it.
Yeah.
And again, I think what's important, because I can hear myself and maybe parents listening being like, we just don't have the time. It just won't work for our life. But what I'm hearing you say is, this is something that was valuable to you.
Yeah.
It was important. You wanted to prioritize it. And there's absolutely a way to do it.
Yeah.
And it might look different for our family.
Absolutely,
and it might look different for another family, but one-on-one time was important. And I know you've mentioned recently that some of those breakfasts have been a great time to bring up a certain topic. Not every time. Sometimes it's just good times and just investing and loving on them. But other times it can be like something you want to bring up with them.
Yeah.
Like the birds and the bees, you know, but like anything really. And it's just a great opportunity. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, if you have a breakfast once a month with every one of your kids, and let's say you do it from, not even from, you're doing it really young, but if you do it until they're 18, all those years, and that's 12 times a year, for 10 years would be 120 one-on-one dates with mom and dad.
Yeah.
And that's the part of parenting that we like can easily forget is that consistency builds.
Yeah.
And we can't always see the value in doing something one time, but when you're doing it regularly, it has so much value, and your children will be like ingrained into them as something that's been a part of their life. There's just so much value in that consistency. So I just love it so much.
And I think it can even spread into when they're adults or college students.
Sure, right? Like, why not?
Yeah, like, okay, we're going to continue this, and then it might get harder when they become married, but why not? Why can't I take my 30-year-old son out for breakfast once a month?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And again, it's just going to give them a great framework for their lives and relationships, and just it's worth spending time with people and putting it as a priority. Getting up a little earlier and putting your phone down are things that people are doing less and less. Yeah. And we need to do more and more for the things that matter and the people that matter. Yeah. So I love it.
Yeah.
I'll chime in with a family practice we have that I think is really simple but great, and that's reading Proverbs.
Yes.
Our family has been doing it, I think, probably about 3 years now.
Okay.
That we read, and we don't do it every single day. So don't get all like, no way, this is impossible.
We do. No, I'm just kidding. You'll catch up, Liz.
But I know. I'm always the underachiever, but we try to read a chapter of Proverbs every day is the goal, because there are 31 chapters in Proverbs. So there's one for every day of the month.
Yes.
So no matter what day it is, you know where to go. It's not hard. The kids understand this now. So it's like, what's the date? Okay, it's the 12th.
Yeah.
Let's go to Proverbs 12.
Yeah.
And we read the whole verse. And usually the way this looks is if it's in the morning, we do it in the morning. Oftentimes, especially since moving back and switching from homeschool to going to school, we do it in the car.
Yeah, yeah.
So the kids are in the car. They are a captive audience. I pull up the chapter on my phone and, okay, who's reading the first 6 verses, and they pass the phone around. All my kids read at this point. And before we start, they know that they're listening for the voice of God to point out a proverb for them. So a personal proverb that they can, whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be super profound. Sometimes they pick out the funny one, and I'm like, let's talk about the funny one, because there are some funny proverbs.
Yes.
And that's okay. But it has been so incredible. Yeah. I cannot overstate how awesome this has been for my family. Hearing my kids at any point in the week, in the middle of the day, bring up, well, that proverb. I mean, it's so awesome. Yeah. And you mentioned, my son with his killer hash brown. Yeah. That conversation came from a proverb, and I'll read it to you.
Okay.
And it was just a few days ago, so it was the 9th. So we were in Proverbs 9, and it says in Proverbs 9, verse 9, give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. And the opposite of this was the verse prior. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. So I started talking about that. Okay, you're wise already. Great. You already know how to do breakfast so well. But if somebody came and said, hey, that's cool. Hey, but I do it a different way. Yeah. Instead of being like, no, I already know how to do it. Thanks. No, thanks. You can go now.
Yes.
Instead, be like, you know what? I could get still wiser. If I'm open to correction, if I'm open to even more insight, then I am just getting wiser.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So that's just one example of so many conversations that I've had with all of my kids across the board over these years that we've been doing this.
Yeah.
And again, because it's something we try to do daily, even if we miss the 11th.
Sure.
We're going to get to the 11th next month.
Yes.
And we're going to do this for years.
Yeah.
So they will be getting these proverbs constantly. And it's that consistency that we're already seeing the fruit of. And I just know as they get older, different proverbs are going to be more valuable to them. The simple ones now are so good. Proverbs is we've always said it's bite-sized wisdom.
Yeah.
Any kid can handle the wisdom of Proverbs and apply it to their lives.
Yes.
Being corrected is literally what kids are like their whole lives. They're at school. They're on the playground. So the value of understanding that is huge at any age, and so many other things. So that's a really huge one that my kids brought up. Hazel was the one who brought up reading Proverbs. And when I asked her why, she said, because we learn wisdom. And I was like, amen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Another big one that when I asked my son, and it was the first one he said, was to be thankful. And that's a huge one in our family. Something that we did when they were younger is at bedtime, when we were doing prayers and just kind of bedtime routine. In the routine was something we had that was we ended up calling it 3 things. And it's each person names 3 things that they can be thankful for from the day. And the point of this is, as you know, we know the Bible talks about the value of being thankful, but also we know the research shows that people who practice gratitude, whether they have a gratitude journal or whatever it is they do, but people who practice gratitude are happier and healthier. So this one really has a lot of impact on that daily, the way you think about your life and your day. So on a day when things have gone wonderful, let's point it out. Man, we got to go see our cousins. We got to have an ice cream sundae. We got to stay up late and watch a movie. Boom, 3 things, easy. Other days, maybe they didn't go so well. And those days, it's still important to do the 3 things because even in a bad day, there are things to be thankful for. The day you broke your arm, okay, what can we be thankful for? Well, we're really thankful that you were able to go to the doctors and get help. We're really thankful that you could watch the iPad for as long as you got to watch the iPad because you broke your arm. Whatever. But the point is just walking our kids through how to find the blessings and the joy in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, so we used to, you just brought this to my memory. School recently just ended, but we, on the drive into school, we introduced something years ago where we would pray on our way to school. But I would find that their prayers were very much, thank you for whatever. They were very, the same sentence over and over. So I said, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it. You have to tell me something you're thankful for, a person that you're thankful for, and then one prayer request. So that became what we did, and all of them would do it. And even when my brother lived with me last year, he was a senior in high school, I made him join in, so it was a thing. And some days they're like, well, I'm not thankful for anything. So then I taught them, well, look out the window. Look at the beautiful sky. Look at the clouds. Look at the leaves falling. Like, those are things to be thankful for. It doesn't have to be this profound thing. And so the kids ended up like they'd see a deer. I'm thankful that I was able to see a deer on the drive to school. And then bringing out a person that they're thankful for made them think of different people.
Yeah.
And once in a while, I think they said they were thankful for each other, very rarely, but at least they were thankful for someone.
Yeah.
So I had remembered that when you said that, and it's
really good.
Yeah.
And it was really sweet. This is my 8-year-old son when he said that, and I said, well, why? Why is it important to be thankful? And he said, well, it's healthy for your soul.
Yes. So simple, but so true, right?
That's it. Yes. And I mean, we're talking about healthy lifestyle. And if you avoid the soul, the emotions, the mental aspect, the spiritual aspect, of course, you're doing a disservice to your child. So we talk about healthy food. I mean, we do often have those conversations. My kids get a little bit obnoxious because they're like, is that a carbohydrate or is that? And I'm like, oh my gosh, but it's good. We do talk about it. So, talk to your kids about good, healthy eating habits, but also considering the soul. And I often talk about the health of their soul. Just the other day, we talked about out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what's in your heart? And how does that work?
Yeah.
How do you get stuff into your heart, And the value of putting wisdom in, putting God's love in. So the health of the soul for kids to start to think about at a young age is awesome. And so that really blessed me.
That is a blessing.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That he'd be able to even understand that.
And I want to talk about this because we mentioned it and my son brought it up, so it's a good segue. He said, another thing that we do is, he said, it's fine to be emotional, but we don't have to react right away. And the reason he said that is because we often talk about emotions and how powerful that they are and how you got to listen to them, but you don't have to react in your emotions. And self-control doesn't mean ignoring your emotions, stifling them, but it's recognizing that emotions don't make good leaders.
Yeah.
So that's a phrase that I say a lot with my kids. Again, sometimes they roll their eyes at me, but it's a truth that I want them to just, it's a script, really. We're giving our kids scripts. We're giving them wisdom that they'll fall back on. When everything else is confusing, these are things that they know.
Yeah.
And that's one. Emotions make bad leaders, but we do need to listen to them.
Yeah.
So because of your expertise in this area with counseling and everything, I'd love to hear your thoughts on emotions and the emotional health of us and our kids.
Yeah, I mean, in brief, we don't have a lot of time, but in brief, that to try to bring an understanding that kids like don't have a grip on their emotions, like their emotions are so big, and oftentimes there's something underlining what we're seeing. So I have one child in particular that is incredibly big in their emotions, and my goal with that child is to teach them the reaction or the response of this big emotion is not really what you're wanting to tell mom and dad. Like, we're here for you, we're okay, but like, how do we bring that in? And it's a gift to be able to teach a child, like, don't be scared of your emotions. I'm not mad at your emotions, but those emotions are really big. And like you said, they don't have to control you. So let's take the time, whatever it looks like, to bring that in and to see what really is going on.
Yeah.
And of course, like, parents fail at this all the time because, like you said earlier in the show, we're incredibly exhausted with everything that's coming at us. And if your child is just upset and you're tired and you're needing to do a bunch of things, it's not always the easiest thing to do. But I think I would just like to give that tip to parents that if your child is showing big emotions, it's because they literally don't know how to do anything else. And that's normal. That doesn't mean you've done wrong in parenting. That means, like, cognitively, that's where they are. And so to try to continue to teach them that we can bring those big emotions in so that we can really express what's going on with us. And being an example to that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm like, man,
that's huge.
If we don't know how to get our emotions in the back seat instead of in the driver's seat, then again, how are we going to help our kids with this?
And we don't get the green card that our kids get in that, because we should have a grip on our emotions, right? Like, I can't say the same things about adults. Like, your emotions are too big. You don't know what to do. No.
No, you do.
Like, you're able. You're able. Maybe you haven't learned. Some of us haven't learned, but then it's time to learn.
Okay, so when my kid screams at me, I'm not allowed to scream back, is what you're saying to me, Meg. And that's hard to hear because I do love a good screaming match. And I want to just confess, like, I have screamed at my kids.
Yeah, same.
Okay?
Same.
But one of the things that I have done also quite a bit is apologize to my kids if I have really lost it like that. And I have lost it. Okay, guys, we do. And that is also an opportunity to show what it looks like to ask for forgiveness and also to go to God for grace and to humble ourselves before the Lord personally. So honestly, in parenting, I feel like nothing is wasted when it comes to God growing us, because even in those failures, when we do, meet our kids at that same level of emotion and we know we shouldn't, we still have an opportunity there with the Lord to grow and to be humbled and to come closer to Him. And then also with our child to teach them what it looks like to apologize, to take responsibility for our actions. So, I mean, we don't have a ton more time, but I think you had mentioned that as parents, you don't go into your place of work an emotional wreck and expect it to go well. But in parenting, sometimes we don't take the time to check ourselves when it comes to our emotional state. And you had mentioned like, okay, parents, you do in a sense, when you're going into the battlefield of parenting, you have to be ready. And part of that is putting your emotional state, if you're stressed, if you're angry, if you're scared, whatever it is, you do have to put it on the shelf, or you had said kind of in a way, put it in a box. And someone listening might be like, whoa, that doesn't sound healthy. We're not suppressing our emotions. But you were saying like our children cannot be the target or the victim of our unaddressed, out of control emotions.
Right.
And that's where we have to be the big kids.
Yeah.
We got to put my big girl
right.
pants on and say, even though I'm stressed, even though I'm worried about this situation, even though I'm angry about this, when it comes to my child, I need to be steady, stable. And I have a verse for that because I just read it the other day and it really like hit me. Psalm 112. It says in the end of verse 7 and the beginning of 8, it says, actually, all of verse 7, it says, he is not afraid of bad news. His heart is firm, trusting in the Lord. His heart is steady. He will not be afraid. And those two words, firm and steady, I think that's like a call to every parent. What your child needs is a loving, firm, steady parent.
Yeah.
And that is such an incredible gift when the world is not steady. It is not stable.
That's right.
Everything outside of you could be totally out of control.
Yes.
But if you are safe, firm, you're settled, you're okay.
Yeah.
Even though you've got personal stuff going on because you're a human being, but with your child, you're that presence in their life. It is such a gift.
Yeah, and to be clear, like the box is never locked, and it shouldn't be locked. And the idea is that when you're putting your problems, if you may, in a box, there also has to be time when you're opening the box.
Yes.
Whether that's with your husband in the evening, whether that's alone before the Lord, and you're like, Lord, this is going on. Please search my heart, help me. Whether it's you go see a counselor, the box needs to be opened. But there is a time where you put it in its box so that you can be present with your children. And that has to be a mental decision because we've all been there.
Yeah.
If we get a bad phone call and then we hang up and we're looking at our kids, what are you going to do? If you don't consciously say, I'm going to put that phone call over there. I'm going to package it up until I can talk to my husband or somebody about it, and I'm going to be present with my kids. You're going to take it out on your kids.
Yeah.
That's reality. That's everybody.
Yep.
So I think that's just the
that's huge.
That's huge. And I just want to read one verse. I know we have to go, but if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to you. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. I love these verses because as we navigate parenting and even as we share all of these tools and all of these tips, at the end of the day, we have to go to the Lord and ask for wisdom for our child and for each of our children.
Yes.
So I just wanted to share that to bring that.
Amen. That's the perfect way to end this. I knew this show would fly by, but this has been really good. And I do hope this was encouraging and helpful to people listening. We're with you. We're in it with you. We are for you. And we're just praying that God has used this to maybe just excite you and refresh you in this incredible responsibility and privilege that is raising human beings.
Yes.
So thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our shows, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. And be sure to tune in next week. Thanks and have a good weekend.
See you later.